African spirituality is deeply rooted in the relationship between the living and their ancestors, and this connection forms the cornerstone of many indigenous religious practices across the continent. The role of ancestors in African spirituality is complex, encompassing aspects of reverence, guidance, protection, and a bridge between the physical and spiritual realms. For centuries, African societies have upheld the belief that the ancestors, those who have passed away but remain connected to the living, play a crucial role in the well-being, moral guidance, and cultural continuity of their communities. In African belief systems, death is not seen as an end, but rather as a transition to another state of existence. The dead are believed to enter a realm where they maintain a closer relationship with the divine and continue to influence the lives of the living. This view of death as a transformation means that ancestors are not simply forgotten or relegated to the past. Instead, they become active participants in the ongoing life of their descendants. In many African traditions, the dead retain a spiritual presence that can be invoked or communicated with, typically through rituals, prayers, and offerings. The dead are believed to have the ability to affect both positive and negative outcomes for their living relatives, and thus maintaining a respectful relationship with the ancestors is vital for harmony and prosperity. The connection between ancestors and the living is primarily expressed through ancestral veneration, a practice found across the continent in various forms. This reverence is not worship in the Western sense, but rather an acknowledgement of the ancestors' enduring presence and power. In African spirituality, ancestors are seen as intermediaries between the living and the divine. They occupy a special place, often acting as mediators who convey the needs of the living to the gods and help bring blessings, health, and guidance to those on earth. This belief elevates the ancestors to a position of reverence and respect, as they are perceived to possess wisdom and experience that transcend the mortal plane. Ancestral veneration is often conducted through ceremonies that involve prayers, songs, dances, and offerings. These rituals are central to maintaining the balance between the spiritual and physical worlds. The offerings made to ancestors, such as food, drink, or symbolic objects, are given to ensure the ancestors' favor and to keep their connection to the living strong. These acts of devotion are seen as essential for the continued well-being of the individual, family, and community. In many African societies, it is believed that neglecting the ancestors can result in misfortune, illness, or even death, as the ancestral spirits may become displeased if they are not properly honored. The concept of the ancestral spirit is not uniform across all African cultures, but common themes exist. The ancestral spirits are generally regarded as guardians of tradition and moral order. Their role is to guide the living, ensuring that they adhere to the customs and values that define their culture. For many African societies, ancestors represent a source of ethical authority, and their approval or disapproval can influence community decisions and behaviors. They are often seen as protectors of the family or clan, capable of interceding on behalf of their descendants in times of crisis or need. The living often turn to the ancestors for advice, protection from evil forces, or blessings in matters such as fertility, marriage, or health. In African spirituality, the ancestors' relationship with the living is reciprocal. Just as the living honor the ancestors, in turn, offer protection, guidance, and blessings. This mutual relationship is based on a deep understanding of interconnectedness, where both the living and the dead are part of a continuous cycle of existence. In this framework, the ancestors act as a moral compass, and their involvement in the lives of the living is not merely symbolic but a real and active part of spiritual life. The belief that the ancestors are always watching reinforces the importance of living in a way that honors the past and adheres to communal values. The role of ancestors extends beyond the family unit to encompass the broader community. In many African societies, it is not only one's direct ancestors who are revered, but also the collective ancestors of the community. This can include revered leaders, wise elders, and influential figures who have shaped the culture and history of a people. These ancestors hold special significance in that they serve as cultural heroes whose legacies continue to shape the moral and spiritual life of the community. In this way, the ancestors are not just personal guides for individual families, but also guardians of cultural continuity and identity. The connection to ancestors is also a key component of African cosmology, where the universe is understood to consist of different realms: the physical, the spiritual, and the ancestral. The spiritual realm is often perceived as a higher plane where the gods reside, while the ancestral realm is a bridge between the spiritual and the physical worlds. In this cosmology, the ancestors serve as intermediaries who have access to divine power but remain deeply connected to the concerns and struggles of the living. By acting as conduits between these realms, the ancestors enable a constant flow of spiritual energy and guidance, which ensures that the physical world remains in harmony with the spiritual forces governing it. The concept of ancestral intervention is not limited to individual guidance, but extends to the protection of the entire community or nation. In times of war, disease, or natural disaster, communities may invoke the spirits of their ancestors to intercede on their behalf. It is believed that the ancestors, due to their proximity to the divine, possess the power to influence outcomes in the material world. For instance, they may be called upon to provide strength to warriors in battle, heal the sick, or avert natural calamities. The belief in the protective role of ancestors is widespread across the continent and highlights the deep spiritual relationship that exists between the living and the dead. In many African societies, ancestral spirits are often linked to specific locations or natural features such as mountains, rivers, or trees, which are believed to be the dwelling places of these spirits. These sacred sites serve as places where the living can commune with the ancestors and seek their guidance. Such places are often protected and regarded with deep respect, as they represent the physical manifestations of the ancestors' presence in the world. The reverence for sacred spaces tied to ancestral spirits reflects the broader African worldview, in which the natural and spiritual worlds are intricately intertwined. The transmission of knowledge from one generation to the next is another critical aspect of the role of ancestors in African spirituality. Through oral traditions, stories, and rituals, the wisdom and experiences of the ancestors are passed down, ensuring the survival of cultural practices, spiritual beliefs, and ethical values. Ancestors are seen as the keepers of knowledge, and their teachings help to maintain the social and spiritual fabric of African communities. In this sense, the ancestors are not only spiritual guides but also cultural custodians whose influence shapes the identity and continuity of the people. Ancestral veneration also has a significant role in African art, music, and performance. Masks, sculptures, and other artistic expressions are often created to honor the ancestors or to be used in rituals that involve the invocation of ancestral spirits. Music and dance, too, are integral to these rituals, serving as a means of communication with the spiritual world. The rhythms and movements of these performances are believed to create a link between the living and the ancestors, allowing for spiritual communion and the transfer of blessings or guidance. In contemporary African societies, the role of ancestors continues to evolve, blending with other religious and spiritual influences such as Christianity and Islam. Many African Christians and Muslims still maintain some form of ancestral reverence, incorporating traditional practices into their faith. This syncretism reflects the enduring importance of ancestors in African spirituality and the ability of these belief systems to adapt to changing cultural landscapes while maintaining core values. Even as African societies modernize, the connection to ancestors remains a fundamental part of spiritual identity, providing a sense of continuity, belonging, and purpose. Ultimately, the role of ancestors in African spirituality transcends the boundaries of life and death, offering a dynamic relationship that sustains the moral, cultural, and spiritual life of the living. The ancestors are not passive figures of the past, but active participants in the present, guiding, protecting, and nurturing their descendants. Their presence reinforces the African worldview of interconnectedness, where the living, the dead, and the divine are part of an unbroken cycle of existence.